Penguin lost 12,000 copies of the book, and that is why there's going to be another printing.
I am horrified and delighted. Happy New Comic Book Day, geeks, and welcome to issue 13 of the Script Heroes podcast.
The show where we bring you comic news, book reviews, and of course, industry blues. My name is Joseph Jasonowski. I'm the writer of Janitor Hero, Cunning Carly, and the Cryptoverse.
And I'm Katie Markham, scripter of the Rusty Robot Country Club and ghostwriter extraordinaire.
Today we will be talking about our polls for this week, which include Daredevil Gang War, Suicide Squad Kill Arkham Asylum, that's the tie-in to the new Suicide Squad video game, the One Hand #1, and of course the highly anticipated Thundercats #1 from Dynamite Comics.
That is right, and in our back issue review for the week, we're going to be talking about Above Snakes by Sean Lewis and Hayden Sherman.
I'm very excited to talk about that one. And if you all are excited to talk about anything with us, you can follow the pod on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, all at the handle Script Heroes Pod. Or you can find my personal socials at JJAZ1111.
And I'm on all socials at Katie Markham Pro.
Now, let's move into the news. Okay, Katie, are you ready for our first little bit of news for this week?
I sure am.
So I'm not sure if you've heard about this, but Ultimate Black Panther 1, I think came out this past week. It's coming out now. Yeah, okay. So they have already greenlit a reprinting for this book, which felt a little bit weird. But now it has come out that Penguin lost 12,000 copies of the book, and that is why there's going to be another printing.
I am horrified and delighted. When I went to go pick up my polls this week, Ultimate Black Panther was completely sold out. There was a little sign on the spot that said limit 1 per person, and I was chatting with my comic guy about it, and he's like, yeah, I think that people just thought because Spider-Man ended up being so valuable, everyone was trying to get their hands on it, but then no one could get their hands on them, so everyone was scrambling for them even more. It's like, reprints are coming, it's okay. But that is absurd to me that it was the publisher's fault. It wasn't just that, Well,
not the publisher's fault, the distributor's fault.
I thought you said Penguin lost.
Yeah.
Oh, Penguin's they lost money from lost copies. Gotcha.
What? Anyway.
I suppose this could be a crossing of wires. Because when you say Penguin, when talking about, books, I think Penguin Random House.
Yeah.
So publisher, not Marvel, but publishing company.
Yeah, but they're in comics, they're a distributor.
No, I get you.
A distributor in comics. Anyway. So they've lost 12,000 copies, which, if you are not big into, print runs and stuff in comics, is quite a lot. Most books sell, Marvel books and DC books will sell a bit more, but there's a lot of books that don't sell 12,000 copies in comic books. That is a metric ton of comics for this distributor to lose. I'm sure Marvel's not happy. I'm sure the people who worked on this book aren't happy.
Especially for a new #1.
Yeah, in the Ultimate Universe after. But the funny thing is, this is in some way going to end up validating the speculator on the new Ultimate Universe, because now this Black Panther book might actually see it's getting the initial boost, but it might actually be sustained. I'm always one to say new books don't ever keep their value, but when maybe a third of this print run, a fourth of this print run has been lost, it's going to be more limited, know? So, God, I can't believe we're justifying speculators now, but that's what Penguin has done.
But the good news is I think that it was probably the policy of a lot of comic shops to be like, no, we want to get copies to people who want it to read, so, take one and go. No,
you are way too optimistic about comics. I guarantee you there are those ones, because there were ones doing it for Ultimate Spider-Man, which didn't even have missing copies or anything, where they literally just take them off the wall and reprice them up to eBay prices.
I suppose I just shop at the right kinds of comic shops.
I try to as well, but anyway, I think that's about all this news story happened.
No, that is so funny.
It is funny. It is disappointing, and that's about it. But we got one more news story for this week if you want to move over to that.
Let's scoot on over.
Okay, so our next little bit of news is about a controversial comic book artist. And I don't mean this in a controversial for his art comic book artist.
Oh
Um,
no.
this little bit of news is about Rob Liefeld. So I don't know if you were aware, Katie, that Rob Liefeld has been doing a Deadpool book that was a sequel to another Deadpool book he did. He's doing Deadpool Batter Blood, which I think has like just ended. And at the completion of Deadpool Batter Blood, Rob Liefeld has announced his permanent retirement from working on Deadpool, which came as a shock. I had a friend sent me a text message that was like, I cannot believe this. And I was also shocked. There's a long, I'm not going to read the long like message about, creating Deadpool and retiring from Deadpool. But I think a lot of people would have assumed that Rob Liefeld would keep doing Deadpool until,
Yeah.
So I find this to be wild. I wanted to share it. I wanted to hear your thoughts because I know you were just the biggest Rob Liefeld fan I've ever talked
Here's
to.
the thing. I know a lot of people make fun of his art. And I mean, I don't think it's good. I mean, it's good compared to like what I can do. I think that there's a lot of weird anatomical things going on, but it gets overly memed for sure. I think that his
I agree.
whole history with Todd McFarlane is a little weird, but if I'm not mistaken, I think that they seem to have resolved that in some way. So it's none of my business.
I think there's still a couple guys there that have issues with, like, I think Larson still has. Don't quote me on this, but I think Larson still has issues with Liefeld. Like, I think a couple of the Image guys do, but most of them don't anymore. If I'm not
and
mistaken.
from what I've heard, he used to be very unpleasant, like at conventions and stuff, but has since gotten much better. Probably as people stop being as mean to him. Because again, harassing creators, no matter how you feel about the content of their creation, is not cool. It's like all well and good to poke fun at people. Just don't do it to their faces. Like, that's so mean and uncalled for.
Yeah.
So I'm not his biggest fan. I do think it's absurd, though, that he would retire from Dead, because there's no way that he's not going to do like variant covers and stuff. Like, that seems absurd.
I don't know. He said he's done with that. I mean, he did a variant cover for for Thundercats, which we're going to talk about today. It sold a fuck ton of copies.
Yeah.
So like, it's not like he
had a fuck ton of variants.
Had to do Deadpool, but it's one of those things where I think if he wanted to do work at a big two, he had to do Deadpool. I think that's where he was at in his career. So this feels like, at the very least, it feels like it's a retirement from Marvel as a whole.
I will say, I think that it does feel a little melodramatic to like announce this. Like,
I'll give it to, like, what I've often said about Rob Liefeld is I'm not nearly as hard on his artwork as a lot of people are. I actually quite enjoy his artwork in certain places.
Look, you gotta love the thunder thighs sometimes.
Is a little bit, at times. I don't like the way that he talks about writers a lot of the time in comic books. But moving beyond that, like, I'll give it to him. Like, if he'll say co-created a character. I think it's valid to say that, like, you're not going to work. Like, if I'm trying to think of somebody else who created a character now at the, like, if God, okay, I'm not going to think of one now. But anyway, because all the ones I want to think of are indies, which is going to function a little bit different. But like, if Mike Mignola had said like, "Oh, I'll keep writing," but if he had made a statement like, "I'm never going to draw Hellboy again," I think everybody would be like, okay, like, that's worthy of a statement. So I think it's somewhat valid for a co-creator of a book. I'll give you a good example because he doesn't work. If Kevin Eastman was going to say, "I'm done working on Ninja Turtle stuff," he doesn't own it anymore. He does stuff for IDW. I would be like, yeah, that warrants a statement. It makes sense for Kevin Eastman to tell us, "Oh, he's not going to work on the Turtles anymore. He co-created them." So I'll give him a little bit of it'll be. I'll definitely see it, and I'll be valid for people to laugh at him if he does go back and do more Deadpool after
That's
this.
what I was going to say, because there's no way he's not going to. If you're not familiar, he left Marvel with Todd McFarlane to be like to make Image comics.
I love that. I
And
love that you know only like 2 or 3 of the Image founders. You
well,
always say like Rob Liefeld and Todd McFarlane.
my thought is that they're kind of the big ones, but like, sure,
Jim
what
Lee.
Savage Dragon dude. Yeah, but he also very much went back. The reason that I bring up those two in particular is because Todd McFarlane was asked to go back to Marvel, was offered a huge sum of money, and said, like, no, you guys screwed us over. We have our own great thing going here. And then Rob Liefeld was like, oh, can I do it? And went back and
I mean, Jim Lee did it too. Jim Lee did it too. You know.
Sure. I will say I'm not as familiar with Jim Lee's deep lore.
Jim Lee did. He left the exact same time that Rob Liefeld. Well, or actually, I think a little bit after, because Rob Liefeld actually like was kicked out before he left back for Marvel. Like that's a little.
Exactly.
Man,
that's why I'm not as good on his.
It's a very funny.
Jim Lee's deep lore because he didn't.
Image has gone through some like turbulence in the mid to late 90s after the speculator boom crash, which is very funny. But anyway, I figured that was a good bit of news for us to talk about because it's like it's
good for you, Rob Liefeld.
It's definitely, yeah. And I mean, it's like it is significant. His Deadpool books sell. His books for Thundercats sell. Whatever you think about the man, he knows how to sell comic books. So.
Though I'm calling a shot now. He's not done doing Deadpool. Like maybe he won't do interiors anymore, but that man is going to be doing variant covers of Deadpool until the day he dies.
At the very least, he'll do a variant cover for the next anniversary. He's got to, like he always does a variant cover for the anniversary. He does with like X-Force too. So I got to think that he'll. Anyway,
like you said, he knows how to sell comic books, and saying, "Oh, this is Rob Liefeld's last Deadpool," is probably going to sell some comic books.
But I think it already came out, right? Like I feel like this is too delayed to do that. But anyway, let's. This one went a little long, but let's move into the polls for the week where we can talk about his well, not specifically his cover on Thundercats, but the Thundercats that has a cover.
Yes. Flawless transition to the poll list.
Yeah. To the polls. Okay, so our polls for this week is going to be the One Hand #1 from Image, Thundercats #1 from Dynamite, Suicide Squad, Kill Arkham Asylum. That is, of course, the tie-in to the new Suicide Squad video game, and Daredevil Gang War #3, which is the penultimate issue of the event. But that is, of course, not all we polled this week. Katie, what else did you get?
Yeah, I also grabbed Haunted House: A Love Story #3, the Batman and Scooby-Doo Mysteries #2, and I'm finally doing it. I'm jumping back on because I'm like literally 5 years out of date. I've been reading where I wanted to and not anywhere else. I'm finally gonna just start pulling good old Batman again.
That's very valid. I have not pulled Batman.
The current run, like the start of this arc, is some sort of Joker origin story, and then I think there was one that caught my eye coming after. So it's like, I'll jump back on. What'd you grab?
I got Conan the Barbarian #7, DC's How to Lose a Guy Gardner in 10 Days, Ghost Lore #8, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Saturday Morning Adventures #10, and Exo Manowar Unconquered #6. But Katie, do you have any preferences on the order in which we engage in our insightful discussions on these issues?
All right, here's my pitch. Daredevil.
No.
Followed by Suicide Squad.
No.
Followed by The One Hand.
No.
Concluding with Thundercats.
No.
Might I assume you have a different idea of the order?
I which we should engage in our insightful order, but I have no problem with that order. I was just kind of being an ass. It's more fun to be that.
No.
Yeah, right?
All right, well, to make it up to me for being an ass, we can read them in the order that I suggested.
I said it was fun. That was already the... let's move on over to was it Suicide Squad first or Daredevil first? Daredevil Gang War. I've got mine right here. But
beautiful.
Let's do it. Daredevil Gang War #3. Gang War continues for the first time in her life. Electro Baby out of her depth With the city engulfed in violence and chaos, she's the only thing standing between the people of Hell's Kitchen and a bloodthirsty criminal conspiracy. The writer is, of course, still Erica Schultz, X-23, Charmed, and Forgotten Home. The penciler is Sergio Fernandez Davila, Captain Marvel, Conan the Slayer, Red Sonja. The inker is Sean Parsons, Aquaman, Batman Beyond, Spider-Man, Deadpool. The colorist is Cece De La Cruz, and the letterer is Clayton Cowles. I'm going to throw it to you to start off, Katie. Quite liked issue 1. Think we liked issue 2 even more. How are you feeling about issue 3?
I'm a little bummed because issue 3 was not as good to me. I think that the real highlights of issues 1 and 2 were the like fantastic, bombastic action that was going on. And this issue does slow it down quite a bit for us. Whereas in issue 1, we had the amazing fight between Elektra and our mystery assassin. And in issue 2, we had like the cool warehouse sci-fi gunfight going on. This one we have a carjacker fight and then a very brief fight between. Well, I guess it's not that brief, but it doesn't feel as fast-paced of a fight between Elektra and the mystery assassin. And I don't know that the writing has ever been the best part of this series for me. And it's a very writer heavy issue where they like tackle a lot of context that we get. There are a few allusions to just like things that I feel like aren't super relevant. I was particularly bummed because I think that there have been a lot of really cool like little moments that just make you go, oh my gosh, I can't believe that that's like something that they pulled off. There was only really one in this issue with like a a special effect lettering going through a bunch of panels. That was the only thing where I'm like, that is cool. That feels like the thing that's come to be a hallmark of this book.
Yeah.
Other than that, it just felt a little generic to me. Like it didn't.
I agree. What I'm trying to show off here is the amount of pages that this book goes before Daredevil is first.
Yeah.
Elektra Daredevil is first shown. And everything before there is not good. And that was my feeling. Once Daredevil came in, it picked up, and then it picked up even more once we get the like showdown between our villain and Daredevil. Mm-hmm. But that was like the last 6 pages. I was like, this is good, but the issue before that is a bit, like you said, generic. And a little bit like we get all of the like villain backstory of like her with these other villains who she's working for one villain with another villain who's kind of working for that villain, and they're showing up. And I was torn between either this is just not engaging or this is the first big moment where I feel like I need to be reading the rest of the gang war.
That's something that I was thinking as well, because one thing that I really enjoyed in this issue was the heroic ties to gang war. Like at one point Elektra goes on the comms, we like get to see She-Hulk doing something, and at the very end we get a bit of a Spider-Man over the comms as well, and I'm like, okay, it's nice to feel like Elektra is a part of this event, and it's nice for her to have people to bounce off of who aren't like villains for her. Like I wasn't a huge fan of the conversation with She-Hulk, but it was at least
that's what I was gonna say.
It was at least nice to see her interact.
I've never enjoyed the comic with the character who is like mean for being overly serious, but like it works within their context. Elektra is an overly serious character, but that's a good thing and it works for it. So then when there's another character there that like says like, oh man, she's so, I don't know. That's always something that takes me out when it's whether it's Deadpool or She-Hulk or Spider-Man or whoever it is. I never really enjoy those moments. I know there's people who really do like those moments. It's not for me. And especially within the context of an Elektra / Daredevil book, not in the context of like She-Hulk's book.
Right.
Like I think that's an important distinction to make because the tone should more match the title character instead of the guest character.
Exactly. So even though the end of the conversation wasn't like my favorite thing, I liked being able to see into these other parts of gang war, and I liked seeing Elektra talk to someone instead of just like kind of, I don't know, having again kind of generic dialogue exchanges with bad guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this one did not hold up compared to the other ones, in my opinion. I
I
mean,
agree.
where it is, the
This is my
action
least
is
favorite
still
so far.
quite good, just because of how well done the art is. But I'm ready to
I
jump into
love the art.
ratings if you are.
Me too. You start us off here.
Yeah, so I gave this one a 6.5 out of 10. I think that it lost a lot of that special sauce that it had, and in fact had a few things detracting from it. And I would
And
not call it a
is
pull list track.
okay. I am very similar to you. I gave this a 6.75 out of 10. Um, because I don't know. That's where I decided I'm landing
Fair
on it
enough.
because I was debating between 6.5 and a 7, but 7 felt too high. But I really, so much of it is that I just love Sergio Davila's art with Sean Parsons. Like this art team is one of my favorites in comics, especially in Big Two comics.
Mhm.
I absolutely love the art in this series, so I that really helps pull it up. But yeah, 6.75 out of 10 is where I'm feeling. I agree with you. This I would not call post rec for a couple of reasons, but really, like, there is no way you're picking up this issue with nothing else and feeling like you have any grasp of what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. And at least the other ones were, at least had really good action that you could just enjoy visually. But are we ready
Yeah,
to go to the Suicide Squad?
yes, let's kill Arkham Asylum.
Suicide Squad. Kill Arkham Asylum. Things are gonna get messy in this prequel to Rocksteady's Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League video game. Amanda Waller is taking control of the recently rebuilt Arkham, and her brutal tactics and merciless methods have led to the most secure asylum Gotham has ever known. But when the cell doors open and the inmates are left in a free-for-all deathmatch, Waller's true intentions reveal themselves. Identify the strongest, smartest, and most brutal to serve on her Task Force X. This comes to us from writer John Layman, who's done Detective Comics Chew and Gambit, artist Jesus Hervas, who's done Invasive, which we're reading, Hellraiser, and Cyberpunk 2077, you have my word. And the colorist is David Barron, and the letterer is And World Design. Jay, you and I have been playing Suicide Squad Kill the
Yes,
Justice League.
yeah.
How do you feel about this first issue of the comic tie-in?
Um, the first thing I'll say is I really do like Jesus Hervey's artwork, and like I
Me
feel like an
too.
Arkham Asylum book is a good like continuation of like Invasive fits his style great. So does an Arkham Asylum book.
Mm-hmm.
So really like that. I don't. Here's my feeling on this. I only have two notes for this book, and one of them is not a ton happens. And that is my
Correct.
overall feeling on the book. Like, it is a lot of just talking and, like, yes, we exist in the Arkham franchise. That's cool. And, like, Batman's here. And, here are a couple villains in addition to all of the, villains that start in the game. And then um yeah, like that's basically it. Like we go to, I'm not going to kind of spoil the kind of big thing that happens at the end. That's really the
Mm-hmm.
only big thing that happens in this, outside of the death of, I'll say that somebody dies.
Yeah,
It's like kind of a
it's
decently
a good
significant thing.
death. I
Yeah,
liked it,
I
but
liked
I
it
think
too, but
it's
like it's
mhm,
like two moments of significance in like a 24-page issue, which
exactly.
feels
You
rough.
said you only had two notes, and reading back on my notes, it's kind of similar. My first sentence in my notes of two sentences is, "It was a comic, and it is certainly a prequel." It very
It
much is
suffers so much
relying
though.
on
Yeah.
you being invested in the video game already, because, like you said, really nothing happens.
Yeah,
Uh,
but that's not like, even invest in the video, like nothing, and like the it weirdly gets too close to the game. I feel like by the end of it, so I'm like, where's all? Like I thought we were gonna have a lot of time there. Like I'm like, what
right.
what are the
What
other four issues gonna do? Like
I think the other four issues, the other sentence in my notes is, I'm tentatively excited to see the future issues, because I think that, like it said in the blurb at the front there, it's going to be villains not knowing that they are competing, but essentially competing to be on Task Force X. And I think that is going to be really fun to watch. Which that we got any of that in this first issue.
yeah, it's a little rough in that sense, and yeah, even with like knowing the Arkham games, it didn't like
Yeah.
overly excite or enthuse me. Um, I feel like it suffers from very much like the tie-in syndrome, which is like
Yes,
you
yeah.
don't have to do much, and sometimes you really don't do much. Which I feel like is why I end up lording so much credit onto Tom Taylor for like building an entire world in the Injustice books that he
Hmm.
did. For as much people might not love that world, like that man did not phone in doing a tie-in book. Um, More of that when we get tie-in books,
Yeah,
and less of this is
yeah.
my
I
overall
don't think
feeling.
there's
But
much I have to say about this.
yeah, no, I'm ready
If
to
you
go
want to
into
just jump
the
right into
ratings. I think.
ratings,
Yeah, I'll
what'd you
start
give
us
it?
off here. I give it a 6.5 out of 10 because I don't think it's bad, weirdly. It's just like not much happens. Like all the dialogue writing is good, the
Hmm.
art is good, but it's just unremarkable, if that makes sense.
That
So
does.
6.5 out of 10 is where I fell, and I'm not going to give it a Polis Rec, whether you've played the game or not. Like, I just don't think you need it. And
Hmm.
the DLC it gives you for the game isn't great either. So, like, there's no
It's
reason for you
lame. I'm
to
so
have to
mad.
pick
I thought
this
it was
up.
gonna be a skin or something. It's a little weapon
Gotham Knights
charm.
didn't teach you anything.
Gotham Knights taught me nothing. What's funny is that I have the exact same reason for my rating. It's just completely unremarkable in my mind. It is a comic. I gave it a 5 out of 10. Like, it is not something that I would pick up and read again.
That's
It's
fair.
not something I would hand to anyone, but it's a
That's
comic,
fair.
and it's
That's
doing
fair.
fine.
It's
Yeah,
it's
are we
another like
ready?
I really like Jesus Hervé's
Me
artwork
too.
too, which is
Mhm.
uh I especially
Especially
like
for
the way that
King
he draws
Shark
King
and
Shark.
for Killer Croc.
Yes,
Oh!
yes,
Yes. Very well
yeah,
done. Very well done.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, are we ready to jump over to the one hand?
Let's do it. The one hand. Detective Ari Nazar is about to retire with an enviable record until a brutal murder occurs, bearing all the hallmarks of the one hand killer, which should be impossible since Ari already put him away not once, but twice in the years before. What follows is a deadly cat and mouse game as Ari pursues his quarry down the rain soaked streets of Neo Nirvana. Ari will stop at nothing to unravel the secrets and ciphers of this case, but each revelation only leads further into the dark heart of his future metropolis and Ari's own beleaguered soul. The writer is Ram V, Detective Comics, Swamp Thing, Catwoman. The artist is Lawrence Campbell, BRPD 2000 AD. The colorist is Lee Lowridge, and the letterer is Adita Bittaker. Katie, this feels so up your alley.
It
So,
does, doesn't it?
yeah.
I mean, I feel like between this and being very enthused about Dear Editor, I'm really uh, and my generally upticked excitement about Lotus Land. I don't know. I don't think I would have realized how into like not murder mysteries in that sense, but like kind of
Detective books.
noir detective
Yeah, it's more
mysteries. I
detective.
really
Yeah, yeah,
am, which is so
yeah.
silly because my, I mean, Batman was my jam for the longest time. It mostly continues to be like, oh man, I really do just love a good detective story. Um, and this is a really intriguing detective story. There's this weird cipher thing going on. Uh, the bloody handprint is super rad. There are a lot of really cool elements that are coming together in this. I'm not initially a huge fan of Ari, our lead detective, but I think that I can let him grow on me. I can certainly let him grow on me. I'm hoping we get a little bit more of a supporting cast for him, who I can be more enthused about.
Yeah,
But the mystery is what has really gotten me. How about you?
yeah. It's funny because as we do all these, I am learning more and more that I don't like detective books very much. With that being said, I still think this is a really good comic book.
Hmm.
Um, it's very much of that thing where like this part of me, it's like not super my jam. So like during moments, I get a little bit like, oh man, I'm not. But then they do some really really cool things in this book that kind of pull me back in. There's a lot of dialogueless pages which are really
Hmm.
cool because they make you really have to like kind of pay more attention, especially like the first dialogueless page, or sorry, the second one is one that you kind of have to pay a lot of attention to.
Hmm.
Um, I really like the art here, which is just a
Me
staple
too.
of this week. I think the art works really well. There's some cool kind of layouty vibes, not in the way that it usually is when I say cool layouts. Because usually then I mean like panels being broken and stuff, but just like a lot of
Mhm.
really big panels with like small ones either on the side or above them
Yeah,
or
or
breaking in.
inset.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, I think it's a really solid issue. It's
Mhm.
definitely sets you up to be intrigued for what's to come.
Yes.
This is like a 2 series book launch
Yeah, I
too,
really wanted to touch on that because that's
which
what I'm
is
like hype about.
interesting. I am usually very against, like, I don't think that's a good model for launching something a lot of the
Mhm.
time, but I am still very interested, and I'm sure we will pick up the other book as
Oh
well.
yeah. To touch on what you mean with how this is particularly interesting is that obviously the one hand is focused on Ari, the detective. It looks like the companion book is going to be from the point of view of the killer, so we'll get to see both of those happening in tandem. And I'm really, really psyched to see how that weaves together. Yeah, I liked this quite a bit. There's
Let
such
me
good atmosphere to it.
let me
Uh,
ask you a question because
yes.
I have spent way too long staring at this and feeling like an idiot. So I need to ask you the question of the handprint that they all look at and go, ah, this guy has 6 fingers. It has 5 fingers. Am I weird?
So it has 5 big fingers, but you can see where there's like a little smudge there. And in the dialogue, Ari talks about how every single handprint on previous crime scenes has been perfect. And this one has this little like, and he describes it as being like a partial print as well, which is like the kind of 6 finger coming out next to the pinky
It
and
doesn't
just
look
gently
like
touching.
it is. I think I might have 6. It just felt like a weird leap for a little smudge of red to be like I would have preferred him to draw more of a partial print in the art because it's such a tiny little smudge. In my brain, I was like, it could have just been like an extra little drip of whatever, like
That's
it
fair.
it,
I
it
think
threw
that
me
they
off a little
address
bit.
it well enough in the text for me to super buy into it personally. But I
It's
can see
just
where you'd be
like
coming
that.
from.
That's what makes it the weird jump because he goes immediately like from seeing it. He goes, I think our guy he might have 6 fingers immediately upon seeing this hand with a tiny little smudge to the side of it. I
Well,
was
no,
like,
I
oh,
think that
that's
it's he gets the idea from the spray paint
yeah. But
hand.
then he come yeah. But then like when he comes back, I don't know. It felt very weird to me. Small note, but just the
I
thing that I
hear
wanted
you.
to ask you about because it threw me off a little bit to where
Mhm.
I did just stand at that hair and print for way too long, being like, but what?
No,
Anyway, though,
I
I
fully
do
bought
think it's a
into it
very
for
solid
sure.
book. I really do. I really have enjoyed it. But I'm interested to throw it to you first because I feel like this is your jam.
Yeah, this is my jam. I gave this a 7.5 out of 10. I think that the mystery is really, really good. It would have ranked, and the atmosphere is really, really good. It would have ranked higher for me if I liked Ari more, but I've really not been given anything about him to really attach to, which I think is important when your detective is the main character of your detective comic.
Which
I
is
would call it a
super
pull
fair.
list rack, though. I would definitely pick
Okay,
this up.
okay, okay. Um, yeah, I give this a 7 out of 10, a little bit lower because it's not really my jam, but I do still think it's a really solid issue. Like you said, the mystery is the most interesting thing, and it's really keeping you engaged here. I would also call this a pull list rack. I think this is a very,
Ooh.
this is the first issue that makes me optimistic about where the series is
Mhm.
going to go. So official Script Heroes pull list rack right here for the one hand
Beautiful.
issue one. But
But are we ready to thunder over to Thundercats?
let's do it.
Thundercats, number one. Fleeing through space to escape their dying homeworld, the Thundercats were attacked en route by their mortal enemies, the mutants of Plundar. After diverting their damaged flagship to a planet called Third Earth, the surviving Thundercats now strive to rebuild their society in harmony with the new world's natives. But the mutants, determined to possess the Thundercats' mystical gem, the Eye of Thundera, have tracked them down, and they've also forged an alliance with Mum-Ra, the devil priest of Third Earth. Now the Thundercats, led by an inexperienced Lion-O, must band together as never before to protect their legacy from this combined enemy. But will they be able to withstand the onslaught of Mum-Ra, the ever-living, once he sets his eyes upon them? The writer here is Declan Shalvey from Time Before Time, Alien, and Deadpool versus Old Man Logan. The artist is Drew Moss, who's done Vampirella Red Sonja, Copperhead, and Gargoyles. The colorist is Orencia Studio, and the letterer is Jeff Eckelberry. Jay, neither one of us has any experience with Thundercats,
No,
cartoon,
no,
comics, movies, anything. How
no.
did you feel jumping on in here?
The first thing I'll say is I really appreciate the like 3 to 4 pages dedicated at the beginning just to like re-explaining what I assume is like the premise of the TV show.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Very nice. It does feel like it would do a little bit better to like jog your memory if you have vague memories of the show than to like fully engage you when you haven't heard of it. My overall feeling of this book is so much of like I feel like anybody who is even just the tiniest bit of nostalgia for Thundercats is going to love this,
Yeah.
but I have literally none because I've never
Same.
engaged with a single Thundercats thing. So, like, I think it has very basic, solid art. I think it has
Mm-hmm.
a basic, solid story, but
Yep.
basic and solid work really well when they're wrapped up in a shell that you like, you know.
Yeah.
And basic and solid are very just like, oh, okay, I could take it or leave it when it's wrapped up in something that you don't have nostalgia for.
Yes. Yeah, I think that they do, like you said, they do a good job of contextualizing everything at the start, and I think they do a really good job of, and this could also just be a byproduct of it being like a children's cartoon immediately. Everything feels very easily understood. So like I'm like, all right, this is like their cool clan sword. Understand it. I don't really understand the gauntlet thing going on, but that doesn't seem terribly important. I like get all of the language that they're using. Um, that being said, I know that
They
it's
have simple
probably
names too that are easy to understand, like based on the type of cat that they are. Um,
exactly. It's all very accessible, which
Also
is
appreciate
nice
they
for
say their
what
names like a million times, which is
they
always
sure
something that
do.
I love in comic books. I'm like,
Yes.
great, keep saying those names.
You
Very
know who
helpful.
everyone is.
Yeah,
I will say that I know that the writing is probably like the dialogue writing is probably meant to be what they sound like in the show, but oh my gosh, it's like my least favorite style of writing where it's like borderline medieval and it's really not for me personally. I also felt like a lot of the action scenes gave us like glimpses of action instead of action that you could actually like follow going on, which was a
I
bit of a bummer
agree
for
until
me.
the like I don't want to. I really like the ending action sequence, and that was one of those things. Where it's like I feel like if I had any
Agreed.
nostalgia for this character and this property, I would in my mind be considering this like one of the most badass moments and like awesome things ever. I was like, this feels like it'd be so cool if I cared about these characters. You know?
Yeah, yeah. I think my big takeaway from it was that it's just not for me. It's fine as it
Yeah,
is. Uh, that feels like a good enough transition if you're
yeah,
ready to
yeah.
jump into
Yeah,
ratings.
I'll,
How'd you
I'll
feel?
start us off there. Yeah, like I feel like with everything I've said, it's just a good basic. So like it's not. It doesn't try anything. It's very basic, but it's made for people who like Thundercats. I think
Mm-hmm.
so. For me, it's a 6 out of 10. It's solid. You know, I don't have the same issue with this type of dialogue writing as you do. I enjoy kind of the simple, straightforward, like kind
Mm-hmm.
of overly dramatic dialogue sometimes because it can be really fun if you do care about what's going on.
Yeah,
I'm not going to call it a Polish wreck unless you like Thunder. If you've engaged with Thundercats, but you maybe like, I don't know if they're going to be able to grab it in a comic or whatever. I have a feeling that and again, a feeling because I've never engaged with Thunder. I have a
a
feeling that if you
feline,
like
if you will.
Thundercats, yeah, I have a feline that if you like Thundercats, you will love this book. So I will say no Polish wreck, but get it if you're a Thundercats fan.
We're absolute twins on this. 6 out of 10, and I made the note pull this track if you have the nostalgia for it. But
Yeah,
that's going to take us to the end of our polls for the week. Are you ready to talk about Above Snakes?
I am.
Above Snakes is a supernatural western about Dirt, a man out to avenge his wife's death with nothing but a bloodthirsty vulture to guide his way. What happens when the story of Dirt's pain gets stolen by others and the world he thought he understood turns upside down? Well, we're about to find out. The writer here is Sean Lewis, who's done King Spawn, The Scorched, and the Guardian backup in Actions comic. Action Comics. The artist is Hayden Sherman. We've talked about their work on Chicken Devil before. They've also done Wasted Space, Detective Comics, and Batman Urban Legends. The letter is Hassan Atsman Alao, who also we've talked about a number of times. Wonderful stuff, wonderful stuff. Jay, how did you
Yes,
feel about this thrilling Western cowboy book?
I really enjoyed this.
Me too.
Because what you didn't tell me when you told me it was a Western, and I'm not the biggest fan of Westerns, is that it's a revenge book, and I love revenge books.
That's fair.
I also think that this suits Hayden Sherman's art so much better, in my opinion. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is the perfect use of Hayden Sherman's artwork. Um,
Yeah, they have
yeah, I
like a kind
really,
of almost grimy style, which I think
yeah,
fits really
yeah,
well here. A lot of kind of,
yeah, I really
uh,
enjoyed this.
mhm.
Yeah. It's here's how I'm because I don't want to drop all of my feelings right up front because that's
Fair
that's
enough,
like,
fair enough.
but in my opinion, this is a series that starts good and it ends great. That was my progression. I'm like, oh, this is a good little book.
Hmm.
Oh, this is getting really cool. Oh my god, that was a good book. Like, that is my progression upon reading like issue by issue of this book,
Hmm.
and that's a good progression to have, you know. So I'll
I
start
definitely hear
there.
that.
I really enjoyed this. I enjoy Dirt as a protagonist, and what's his Vulture's name?
Spec.
Spec.
I love
uh
Spec.
it's a good dynamic. It's a nice thing because one of the main problems you can have with revenge books in comic book format, because it works a little bit better I think in like TV or movie, is having just that solo protagonist who has nobody to bounce
Hmm.
off of. Which I think to an extent is, some of the problems that I have with Chicken Devil. Where it's
That's
just
fair.
like you don't get to see some of the progression and stuff because they don't have anybody to bounce off of. Spec is that perfect, like, not another person to actually do things, to affect it, but somebody for him to bounce off of, somebody for him to have and kind of the way that Spec works is such a
Yeah,
cool, twisted idea.
because Spec is
When
like
we
the
get to
spirit
it later
of
on,
vengeance
yeah,
and
when we get
is
later on to like all of the birds and like Spec being the one to get to
oh
like
my
eat the,
gosh.
love that moment so much. So
Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed this, is what
Hmm.
I'm trying to say. But I'm interested to throw it to you.
Yeah, as just a quick kind of more context rundown, it's 5 issues. Uh, we're following Dirt as he's trying to take out the members of the Above Snake Gang who killed his wife. And it ends in a battle of sorts, a battle of wills, a battle of wits, kind of, and then eventually a bit of a gunshot between him and the head of the Above Snakes Gang, Dr. Toombs. And oh my gosh, I would love to jump on Dr. Toombs to start
Yeah,
because he's
yeah,
framed almost as a narrator in each
yeah.
issue. I mean, I
But then he
think
comes in. It's so
exactly.
good.
It's so good.
I actually really like his narration pages. Those like splash
Mhm,
pages with a lot of text. Some honestly, Sean Lewis is joining the list of people who can pack a page full of text for me and not
mhm,
have me get bored or slog down in the text. Like, I never had a problem. The only problem I had sometimes was because of the like lower casing of some of the lettering.
mhm,
Some of those pages that were packed full of text and it was small, I had to like really like lean in to be like, okay, let me read this. Very small minor thing, but I did not have a
mhm.
problem with him packing these pages full of text, which is a good thing.
That is fair.
But
That
I
is
want to keep
super
going.
fair, and I think it's super well done for sure. Uh, yeah, Dr. Toombs is framed as this narration character, and you start to get. I personally didn't right away realize that he was a part of the Above Snakes. I probably
I
should
didn't
have,
either.
especially because they mentioned like the black bandanas and stuff, and that's so important. And he's got like this kind of uh like almost beak-like bandana, which I also loved. I loved how birdish he was with all of the aesthetics of birds and revenge in the book. Um,
Yeah, well, I think it's also just, and this is why I didn't think of it as buff state, is because that like black, usually it's bigger, but that like black bird mask is like known to be the like healers and like
yes,
medicine
yeah,
practitioners of the time. So I just wrote that off as being like, ah, that's what
same.
he should look like for that. So
But I
really
think it
worked
was
out
one of
great.
those things where it's so clever looking back at it, where I'm like,
Yes,
oh my gosh,
yes,
it's not out of nowhere that we learn that
no,
he's the head of the gang, and it also starts there's so many crumbs that you can pick up reading it a second time, like the fact that his wife the reason that they were in debt to the above stakes is because they were giving her like this sleeping medication. And Dr. Toombs immediately is touting himself as this doctor with these potions and stuff. And we just see that come in a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And then what looks like this kind of just kooky framing character, he becomes so menacing. And I really love his evolution on the page, and the way that he talks and acts becomes so sinister and
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah. It doesn't. The funny thing is, it doesn't really change the way that he acts. It's just recontextualized.
Right.
Like when you reread literally those first 2 pages, they feel so menacing looking back.
Yes.
Like he starts with a hello friend, and then on the second page, which by the way is an amazing 2-page splash of like him showing all the things he had, says, "Take a little something for your soul." That is so menacing when you like look at it with the context.
Right.
So it is. I think we've talked about this before. We talked about it in Giant Robot Hellboy. Where like when you don't realize the seeds are being planted, but they are. So as soon as you get that, contextually, everything becomes better. This is one of those books.
Yes. It's so well done. And as a last bit about Dr. Toombs, and to kind of segue into what I think is one of the greatest strengths of the book, his character design is so wonderful. And that I chalk up so much to Hayden Sherman and their art. Looking at the way that they pose characters on the page, looking at the way that they so creatively make, like there's very rarely pages that feel just normal to me. Like obviously those pages you don't really notice as much because, you know, they are normal, but there's so many pages that feel bold and really almost experimental or just incredibly confident.
You gotta say experimental when you talk. I don't know if it's in issue 4 or 5. I think it's 5, where there is a page with over 25 panels on it.
Yes,
holy
it's so
shit!
Good. It's so well
there's
done.
Basically 2 pages there with the flashbacks, and we have like a color scheme for the flashbacks, which is great on its own.
Yes.
But then in these, there's like these little panels that start being overlaid, and then we get a page that has like 20. I think it's 25 little panels and 2 big panels, so like 27 panels, and
it's
like
insane.
You can make out the art so well in each one of them. Experimental is the word, because there's no other word for that.
That's so
I think
fair.
up until then, you can say just like maybe a little bit risky or interesting art. Like there's a great use of empty space. The first issue is such a good example of like the first issue is a lot of like just kind of not doing much in terms of like progressing the plot, but we get like the setup context and we get a lot of really nice art. And then 2 through 5 is like, here's the story, which works out really, really well. But yeah, I don't think you can say anything but experimental, and an experiment that works in those 25 plus. Like that is an insane feat to pull that off. It
really is. And to use that as a transition as well, but for our viewers, the page is up on screen here as best it can be. Those panels also have words in them. Like there's lettering in the panels. I want to jump to Hassan Otsmane for a second, because I've talked about how much I love his lettering before. I feel like it's so well on display in this book, because one of the things that he does that I think is really, really cool is he really makes different types of lettering feel distinct. Like the dialogue is going to look one way, the kind of spiritual speaking of Spec is going to look one way, the captions for Dirt will look one way, and I think that there's such a harmony between them, even though they look so different, and it just elevates everything for me. I love the lettering in every single book that I have seen Otsmane do.
It definitely suits this book very well in the way that it's paired up. But yeah, it like those pages with it legitimately seems like, and I hope that there's a way to find out at some point. But my assumption would be that these were done digitally and then just scaled down, you know, or like done and then scaled down digitally. Like I do not believe that these were done at, and like no comic is done at its size. They're usually done a bit bigger, but I don't think this was done at the normal scale. Like I feel like these had to be done like as if they were a normal size panel and then scaled down, because they are so detailed. Yeah. They all have, you know, just a lot going on. A lot going on is not necessarily, some have a lot going on, but they all have a lot of detail is what I'll say. That's what I meant to say, because they don't have a lot going on, but they have a lot of detail. they don't lose detail at their size as you would expect, because usually you lose detail, and then when you
Right.
make, when they're smaller, it looks just as detailed. But you can zoom in on these, and like they still, it doesn't suddenly go,
Oh yeah.
he just kind of used a couple lines here instead of, like, no, it is just as detailed.
Hmm.
Sherman's art is just as detailed when look at it. They did such a good job with these
Yes.
ridiculous high 10, 15, 20, 25, 27, 28 small panels and one big panel on this page.
Insane. And they function so well from a storytelling perspective as well. Like it fits. This is a moment where our main character Dirt, he's had a horrible realization that like there's a trap set for him, and the page before that page also has a ton of these little inset panels, and we can see the past literally like blocking out his thoughts as he's realizing all of these things that are happening, and then it bursts into just a huge splash page that shows
Yeah,
obviously we are more spoilery here in the back issue review, where we can
yeah,
see
yeah.
Comanche and little Annie
Read above
dead.
snakes. Come
Yes,
back
read
if
above
you have.
snakes.
But yeah, read above snakes.
So
Very
good.
much worth it.
Yes, and we can see them hanging from the rafters of this church dead, and so it goes from that like super in his head thoughts happening so quickly to just single thought that you have to sit with, and
Yeah.
it's so well done.
It's also parallel, like story, like in the past he's rushing back to then presumably find his wife dead. So all of
Yes,
the build to him like running up is in the past, and then it turns to the present where his hands are on the door in the past. Now his hands are on the door in the present, and so the build happens in a different time than the present, but because they're this similar story, the build works for the present reveal. It's so well done.
it
It's
is. It
so
really is just
like I
astounding.
also like I have so many questions about like how you go about approaching these two pages. Like, do you just go to an artist and say, like does the script say there's 20 panels on this page and 28 on the next one, or is it like, okay, have some inlaid panels of this buildup, and the artist just went, Hayden Sherman's just went, I bet I'm gonna go crazy. Like I'm so interested in the progression of like how much say both of them had in getting to this, because this is not a normal
Right,
interaction. I
right.
can't think that leads to this on the page.
No, no. I should point out this is I think it was the third book they'd worked on together. They also worked on Thumbs and The Few. So I mean, we've talked in previous creator corners about the importance of building up a relationship with your artist so
Yeah,
that you can have like the best stuff possible, that it is just the marriage of your abilities. And this feels like just the apex of that, where it's you can work so flawlessly together that you can pull off what should be horrible, and you can make it so so good. Oh my gosh, such a well done sequence. But I do want to touch on because there is a bit of an outlier issue for me. I believe it's issue 3, the issue with the
Comanche.
hunt to get Spec laid.
Yeah,
Is the concept behind it.
yeah,
It feels rather disconnected to me, because in this issue we aren't hunting the. It comes after a big kill, a big old bit of revenge, and then we move on to this that's got basically
yeah.
no revenge at all in it, which was a
Yeah,
bit odd.
it's interesting because I felt the
Hmm.
same way upon first reading it. I feel like I like it more retroactively.
Hmm.
It's interesting because it does still tie in because Kemichi also wants revenge on the same
Yes,
group, so there is that little bit to it, and I do just really like it, like from its own
me too.
standpoint. It's
I like
very
it so much.
fun. It has the most of the relationship between
Speck and Dirt.
is it Spec and Dirt. So I like it, but I agree with you that it does feel a little bit like, I feel like there could be a little bit more of a through line in it, but I
Yeah,
do like it overall.
me too. I really liked it as a single issue. I don't know how it, because it's also supposed to introduce us to Comanche, who later
Yeah,
is found dead in the church, and it's supposed to be this. He's
yeah,
next to another character who we met, who also needed revenge. Lil Annie.
yeah. They
I would
each
love
got
to
like their
touch
own
on
issue.
her
Issue two
issue
is
as well.
Annie's issue,
Yep.
and then issue three is Kim Chi's issue, and then issue four they're both dead. Which
Yes.
is why like retroactively I like it a lot, because there is like that progression. I'm just like, well, I guess yeah, Annie's story felt more connected because it was more direct, but it is the same
Mhm.
thing where like Annie got an issue with her revenge, Kimchi gets one with his. So it is the same structure. It's
It
just
is,
because this one was a little bit more like away. It feels a
yeah,
little
I
more
think
off.
that because we've been hyping up so much, I do want to touch on, I do think that this issue did miss the mark a bit on making Kimchi feel as important as Annie. Like
Yeah.
when Dirt gets to the church and bursts it open and they're both hanging from the rafters dead, and Dirt's like, this is what happens, like these good people that I met have ended up dead, but that's, just what it has to be because I need to get my revenge.
I don't think he says Kamichi's a good. I think he says Annie's a good person and Kamichi's like me. I believe is
Oh,
the
okay. Fair
dialogue.
enough. Fair enough. But I do find that I am far more connected to Annie being dead because we got so much
Yeah,
more of her in her issue.
yeah.
Whereas
I
with
think yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
I think they serve different roles
Hmm.
in there. Like I think Annie's is supposed to be like a I can't believe this happened to a good person like this. This is what happens to people involved. And then Kamichi's supposed to be like, oh, I could die too. Be somebody who's just as vengeful and just as like. So I think they serve different roles. It's like
That is
one is him
fair.
seeing I could die, and the other one is him seeing the people around me die. So I think they
And
have different roles
yeah,
in their death.
and I think there's an inevitable parallel then because this is happening in the church where Dirt and Dorothy got married. And so having like a Dorothy stand in like an innocent woman who was murdered by the Above Snakes gang, and then a vengeful man who was murdered by them. That
Yeah,
that does make sense.
yeah,
It retroactively makes issue 3 better, but
yeah,
it's just rough when you're reading through and you're like, okay,
yeah.
issue
I
3,
I
very
fully agree.
fun issue, good issue, but less connected.
Yeah, I really like that moment from that because like from that standpoint of like, oh
Yes,
man, you get like him and what he's seeing and like them and like you mentioned like them together in the trip, like it just feels so good.
it
Like
does.
it just
It
feels so
does.
good.
I
Like
just
so
wished
that's
I
why I'm
cared about
really like
Comanche a little bit more.
that's fair. That's fair. I'm trying not to just keep singing but I just really like the way that it lands so well in that moment. And then we go into possibly the coolest thing in the book, which is this fight scene that ends with him being buried alive in a coffin.
Yes, yes. And what's
Of
horrifying
which
is
the
there's
two
this like
pages
little
of him
eye
like in
hole.
there and it's posing so good,
So
so
good.
ridiculously
And the
good.
way uh to again hype up the entire team on this, the writing for it is so good, the art for it is so good, and the lettering like coming through the little like eye hole
Gross,
type that it's
gross.
so well done. It's so exciting, it's so tense. I am not gonna lie, I was not convinced that a Dirt was gonna come out on the other side. I was prepared for there to be like, because this book is so bold and so cool, and
Yeah,
it clearly is not glorifying this revenge. We see Comanche die. I was like, oh my god, with us opening with Dr. Toombs, I wouldn't be surprised if it ends with Dr. Toombs as well, where this is a revenge story that
yeah.
doesn't work out.
It's so fun because like here's I'll say a couple things about it. The first thing
Yes.
is that final splash page, as all of the ones with Doctor Toombs tend to be, is so good. With like the Dorothy coming out of the smoke, like in the smoky bubble, so good. It's like if I was reading without knowing the amount of issues, I feel like I'd be more willing to be like, what, this could just be the end. There is then a little bit at the bottom. It's like, is this the end? I could
Mhm.
see that. But the funny thing that I'll also give them a lot of credit for like the start of the next issue, is I was sitting there and I was like, there's really not that much dirt on him right now. This is an old casket. I can't think it's locked. I'm like, he's got to just be able to kick this open. And then he does. And I was like, okay.
Exactly.
I'm
He's like
like,
partially
that's nice.
concussed from getting bashed over the head with a cross,
Yeah.
which I also loved. Like religion didn't play a big role in this book, if really any at all. But seeing
I
a
don't think it
bad
really
guy
does.
with a wooden cross that he just knocked our hero out with, so badass.
Yeah, I think it was more like I don't think religion played. I think the church more played a role as like a symbol along with the cross
Exactly.
of marriage because marriage
Yeah.
plays a role, but I don't think
Yes.
religion specifically does. So I
Agreed.
think
Yeah, I think you hit
it's
on
different.
it with it being a symbol of marriage. But yeah,
Yeah,
so he kicks out from this coffin, and they have this super intense like brawl essentially because he's broken out. He's so pissed with like very good reason, and it's it's so quick but it feels so long. Like as I'm just flipping through the pages, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's only out of the coffin for I think 2 pages. Yeah, he bursts out. We get a page of them brawling. We get a page of them scuffling, and then we get him shooting Doctor Toombs. And it's like, oh my god, that it felt like so much happened in there, and it's
Yeah,
because of how well paced it is. This book is just so good at that.
yeah. And just to get back to the empty space, to the page where he shoots Doctor Doom, also such good back.
Amazing. We have a
Can we
long
also
panel
talk
on the
about like
bottom with the fucking Wild West sunset happening. We see the silhouette of Dr. Toombs running away from the fight because,
yeah,
he's not a badass cowboy. He's
no,
the fucking head of the Above Snakes gang. And we
and let's
see
talk
the
about the
gunshot
silhouette.
going off.
Yeah,
Yes.
because
Go
it
ahead.
changes
Mm-hmm.
from earlier issues where he's framing, and then both at the end of last issue and the first page of this issue where we're seeing him from below. He's a big hulking guy.
Yeah.
The second the tone changes, he becomes a small man who is
Mm-hmm.
the same size, if not smaller, than Dirt. Like when Dirt executes him and you see his like symbol there, or when he's running away, you're like, wait, this dude's tiny. Like he looked huge in all these other panels, which if you notice, looking back, are like all from below to make
Yeah,
him look
like
like
literally
this
the first page of the
monster.
book. The
Yeah.
very first page of the book, he's kind of kneeling on the ground, and the angle is such that the quote unquote camera, the point of view, is on the ground. He is above us. And then the page with the execution just before, which we'll definitely touch on in a second with like the full beautiful execution page, is as if the point of view shot is from below Dirt looking down the barrel of his gun, or rather looking up the barrel of his gun. And like you're saying, it's this amazing parallel where the power is so physically switched on the page. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it's so fun.
So
It's
much
so
can
well
be
done.
done with just even in the way that you draw characters and the angles and stuff. So just a lot of credit to Hayden Sherman for just doing a phenomenal job with that.
Yes, absolutely. And then to kind of cap off our discussion, the end of the book is this swarm of birds like Speck, who all are symbols of people who want revenge against Dr. Toombs. And they're all flying around, but they can't have him. Speck goes in and has him, and Dirt has to contend with the fact he's like, oh, Speck was all I have, because I believe it's a literal line in the first issue, is that all he has is revenge and Speck. He gets his revenge, but Speck is tied to that. Speck tries to convince him to go on like a Wild
Killing
West
more of
adventure.
killing more of the gang, because even though he killed the big bad, there's still more there of it.
And like getting other people's revenge for them, because Speck is fed by this bloodlust. And it ends with Dirt saying no. He throws his gun into the lake and accepts that that's the end of it.
And this all happens at Dorothy's grave too, which I feel like
Yes.
is important. Like he goes there for the first time in this
Mm-hmm.
moment, and that's where this turn happens. Just really, really cool.
And so much of his guilt about Dorothy was because he wasn't there. He was like off at war or something, sending the money for her meds. And his whole thing is like, I wasn't there. I wasn't there to protect her. I wasn't there to deal with this. And him saying, no, I'm not going to leave again. I'm going to stay here. Revenge is done. Is just so fucking badass, man. Oh my gosh. It's so fucking good.
Yeah, yeah.
Ugh.
Is a good comic book.
It's a good comic
Like,
book. It was a good pick.
Is a good comic book.
It was
Is
a
a
good
good
comic
comic
book.
book.
Ugh.
I don't know. Is there anything else you wanna touch
I
on,
don't
Gabe?
think so. I think I'm ready to rock and also roll.
All right. Who's starting off with the ratings before we get into our top 10 lists here?
You go ahead and start us off, because honestly, mine, it didn't change majorly, but I got so fucking excited, as happens a lot of the time when we're just talking about
Yeah.
books.
Yeah.
Talking about what makes them so good just
Yeah.
changes everything for me. Where I'm like,
I had
I'm
mine between
so
two.
thrilled.
Like I was like, it's either this or this, so I picked the higher one after our excited
enough.
discussion. So I rated Above Snakes an 8.5 out of 10. I think it's really good. I think that sticks with what I was like. I might give like the last 2 issues like 9.5s to like 10. Like I love the last 2 issues, but
Yes.
it's good. It's never bad, but it does get better. So when
Mhm.
I'm looking at the whole thing in totality, 8.5 out of 10 feels like the right place. It also works really well as a unit.
Yes.
Like you said, with 3 being a slight detour, but it still ties back in.
Mhm.
So yeah. And then I'll throw it to you before we get into our top 10 list. What did you rate this, Katie?
I'm also giving it an 8.5 out of 10. I initially was
agreement.
like, I'm going to give it an 8. I'm going to give it an 8. Oh,
I was
man.
between 8 and 8.5.
I
To the
might
point that
kick
I
it up
almost
to
did
a 9.
8.25.
You know what? I'm going to say
Oh
an
man, Katie's just
8.75.
jumping. Okay.
8.75. I loved it so much.
Okay.
And
It's so
I feel
good.
it's
It's
worth
so
noting
good.
so much that Hayden Sherman's their art is
I
so
want
up my
you
alley. It's
to respond
so
to me as
so
soon
good.
as you
It's so
hear the next
stylized. I
word
love
that I'm
it
going to say.
so much.
Now,
Wait, the word is
it's
now?
my feeling on it is like when it's
Okay,
so
we'll go
stylized,
again.
like it
We'll
needs
go
to be
again.
the right book.
You
This
understand
felt
what
like the
that's
right
me.
book to me.
I support you on that. I also felt like Chicken Devil was the right book, but that's just a matter of preference. But
Yeah.
are we ready to read off our little top 10 listy lists?
Yeah. I will start to continue with the order that we were doing there. But number 1 is still Noctera Volume 1. Number 2 is still Batman and Robin Volume 1. Number 3 is still New Teen Titans Volume 1. Number 4 is where I'm slotting in above Snakes on my list. Above what is number 5, Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths. 6, Radiant Black Volume 1. 7, Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1. 8, Savage Dragon Baptism of Fire. 9, Chicken Devil Volume 1. 10, Rain, with Percy Jackson being kicked off the list this week.
Bye, Percy Jackson. Yeah, I love that our top 4 are just scrambled versions of each other. My number 1 is Noctera, Full Throttle Dark. Number 2 is the New Teen Titans, Volume 1. Number 3 is I was struck
we've
by
given
a
her
thought
pause.
in real
We've given her
time.
pause.
Oh no, I can't decide. You know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be bold. Number 3 is where I'm gonna put above Snakes.
Okay.
Number 4, Batman and Robin Volume 1. Number 5, Chicken Devil Under Pressure. Number 6, Radiant Black, Not So Secret Origin, as well as Paper Girls Volume 1, which means that number 8, is Rain. It's because there's a tie, so it messes it up. Number 8 is Rain. Number 9 is Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths. Number 10 is Ultimate Spider-Man number 1, which means I said goodbye to Savage Dragon this week. It was better than I thought, but not for me. And a reminder that if you want to check out any of these other books that we mentioned, they're obviously all previous episodes of the pod. The title should be in the title. But yeah, I think that's going to bring us to a close on the back issue review.
Yes, which means
take us over.
It's time
for each other. It is that time once again.
Yeah. Let's shuffle on over.
And here we are in the Creator Corner, where we sit back, relax, talk about writing, talk about the industry, talk about all sorts of fun stuff about being comic creators. This week, I would like to touch on inspiration in a way.
Ooh,
if we look at the books that we read this week, we have a adaptation. Adaptation is the wrong word, but a comic based on a cartoon. We have
licensed comic,
yeah. A detective comic, classic crime mystery genre. We also have Above Snakes, which was very strongly genred as, Western revenge. When you're looking at comics that you like we really enjoyed Above Snakes. When you're looking at something that you like and you're looking to take inspiration from it, where do you go when you're looking at making a book of a genre? Is that something you consider when you're writing?
Not always. Sometimes I'll go I want something like this. One of my recent things was looking at all of my fucked up, cursing, chopping off people's limbs books and being I want something that a child could maybe read without their parents, screaming. So I tried to do something that was more kid friendly. but I don't know if I often sit down to like go like I want to write this genre. You know, like sometimes maybe I've been
Mhm.
hired to, but then typically I get given a property to. It's very rare that I'm just like I'm gonna write this genre. You know, I don't know. Do you typically sit down and be like I want to write this genre?
I think it's something that I do find helpful because obviously genres are not perfect divisions and every single book will have elements of different genres. But like there was over the summer. Jaybird,
You're
hello.
good.
You disappeared
Hello.
from the call and
Oh,
you have
did I?
returned.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We'll keep rolling.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
keep
yeah,
going.
yeah. So over the summer, I was feeling very inspired to write a horror book. So I was like, you know what? I am going into this knowing that it's going to be a horror book. And I know that horror is a bit of a broader genre. Uh,
Yeah.
but it's like, okay, what tropes do I know of in horror? What, what is the language of the genre that we can understand from looking at everything else that came before it? Uh, so I pulled up a few Cullen Bunn books for inspiration, a few other horror books as well, just to kind of get that visual language to understand what goes into that genre. And I think it's something that you do without even noticing that you do it. Like the kids book you mentioned, I believe it's not a violation. It's kind of superhero-y in nature. So pulling things from
Action hero, I'll say is
sure action hero,
Most other people,
superhero.
yeah.
I think they fall under the same category, just whether or not.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's just this. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and so even if you're kind of pulling from these genres, even if it's not, I sat down to write a book of this genre. So if not
Yeah.
from
Well, that's
deciding what you've
the
written,
distinction. Like
mhm,
I don't because I think and it works for some people, but I think for me personally, for a lot of people, like if you sit down to write a genre, you're going to box yourself in. You're going to have a hard time coming up with an idea. I don't usually sit down to write a comic book unless I've been hired without an idea. Like the idea comes
mhm,
first and then the writing. Like I'm not somebody who like writes to come up with an idea. Like I'm not
mhm,
going to sit down and be like, I want to write this genre, so let me start doing things in this genre until an idea pops up. Like I'll typically have an idea and then start writing, and that's how I get into the genre. That's my
mhm,
order of events typically. Like when I was like, I want to do something younger, I kind of happened to be doing something else at the same time that ended up inspiring me. But it's not. I didn't really sit down and like go, okay, I need an idea now. It's for something younger. I kind of just waited until I had an idea and I went, okay, this is something that then fits a younger audience, and that's also
mhm,
more broad than like I because I didn't say, when said I wanted to do something younger, I wasn't already deciding I was going to do an action hero or a superhero
right.
book. That was something that came later. So I very rarely, I usually come up with an idea and then I'll be like, okay, what genre does this fit? Or like what,
Mhm,
I don't even usually, I think, typically think too heavily about the genre because I don't want to be sitting there and being like, what trope should I do that like, unless I'm doing a satire and I want to subvert things. But
mhm,
yeah, that's just not typically my order of events. I typically come from the idea and then go, okay, how does the story work around this idea? Because usually an
mhm,
idea for a concept is either going to be this is what the world is or this is what the character is, and then the story
right.
gets built from there.
Yeah, but obviously the story is going to build into a particular direction. I mean, genres are genres for a
Oh,
reason. It's because it's
you yeeted out there for a second.
weird. Am I back?
Yes, you're back.
Okay. Um.
You're saying it builds
Yes.
into the story's going to build
Yeah.
into.
So the story is going to build into a particular place, and obviously, again, genres aren't hard and fast, but they emerge because of patterns in storytelling and that similar visual language. Like you can have a kiss scene in an action comic that has a completely different vibe than a kiss scene in a romance comic. Uh, and same with like a gunshot in a western comic is going to look different than a gunshot in a superhero comic for the most part. uh, so do you find yourself taking inspiration often from other sources, or do you kind of
Yeah.
reach into the void and kind of the subconscious inspirations?
No, I definitely take inspiration from other things, but I think that one of the key things there is like it doesn't have to be from like the same genre of what you're doing. Um, I think I've talked about this before. There's not something that I do with like things to be published or that I do anymore. But when I was first starting to write comics, something that I really liked doing was grabbing like one of my favorite quotes from something, um,
Ooh.
and then like building out a new scene around that quote. in a completely different genre, in a completely different context. I took a quote at one point from, I want to say Cobra Kai, I think, and then built it into like a like war book,
Uh-huh.
which is, different. And then I think I did the same thing with that same war book, because it's what I was writing while I was like doing this idea. I took a quote from Arrow and I, intertwined that into it. It's a very different context, but it was like kind of a cool way to see how to do stuff like that. But
Yeah, that's a
typically,
really
inspiration
interesting
for me
exercise.
yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's a good thing to do if you're like starting out, to be like, okay, this line really works and it hits hard. So like, how can I build a scene that then will still get the impact out of it? And then eventually you'll learn to get your own lines that have impact. But the build, it helps you learn to the build to the delivery of the impactful line. So I think that's a very fun exercise to do. Yeah. And don't pick like a really famous quote either. Like pick like a random quote from like episode 3 of something that,
No, that's super fun. Yeah, I find myself trying to, and I know that we've touched on this when talking about researching for books, uh, and this was kind of my sense on the matter, is that once I've realized what I'm writing, I really like to familiarize myself with tangential media, that I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to be drawing inspiration from this, or I think this is going to be similar to this. So I want to grab things that have done that before. I mean, one, to learn more of that language, to see what I think works on the page and what I think is stuff that works on a mechanical level, but two, to also like make sure that there's not a whole lot of parallel thinking happening, because when you have those frameworks, you can find yourself kind of sitting on some train tracks and be like, okay, this is something that's already done.
I really wanted to talk about there, and this is I think the tough zone, and this is why sometimes I kind of steer clear of stuff that I think might be similar that I haven't already engaged with, is because there's a difference between inspiration and plagiarism. And here's the important thing when you think about this, is if you have not engaged with the material, you cannot plagiarize it. Even if it's super similar, that is a coincidence. That is fine. Once you have then engaged with it, you are now under the responsibility to make sure that you are not plagiarizing it.
Yes.
So I have definitely come into the situation before where I've read something or I've watched something and been like, God damn, this is really similar to what I was working. Now I have to change that to not be there. Whereas like if you just release something that's kind of similar, like that happens if you haven't engaged with it. So your responsibility changes once you've read something. So if you're doing like, say, I'm thinking of something public domain.
Let's just say a hypothetical Western revenge book that's a little similar.
I think like a public domain thing is a good thing to do for this. So say you're doing a Winnie the Pooh book, I'll use our friend Nick for this. So if you're doing something Winnie the Pooh related and you have engaged with Nick's content and Nick's thing is Winnie the Pooh with a chainsaw, and your thing has a chainsaw, now you should change it because now you're aware. If you weren't aware, it's a coincidence.
That's fair, so and I think that's one of the benefits of engaging with that other media, because even if it's not intentional, if you've never heard of Winnie the Pooh Demon Hunter and you're like, Winnie the Pooh lumberjack is walking around with a chainsaw, that's giving a context to your comic that you aren't realizing.
Yeah.
And so maybe, someone picks up your wholesome Winnie the Pooh is going on a Habitat for Humanity mission, and there's a scene where he's, revving on a chainsaw to fell a tree.
Yeah.
For people who are reading your book, and perhaps if it's people who are like, I want to see new takes on Winnie the Pooh, they've already read Nick's. Yeah. Then you're unintentionally giving that context where it's like, oh, I remember a time when Winnie the Pooh chopped a demon in half with a chainsaw. Yeah. And instead you're like, no, this is Winnie the Pooh on a mission trip. And so it gives that other perspective. That's the important,
but that you touched on the reason why, I think, because like in the scenario type, like that's a scenario where it's kind of where it's just like, oh, in one panel in my book, this guy picked up a chainsaw and cut down a tree. Mm-hmm. Now you've read the thing and you're like, now I got to change that because I'm thinking, there's a difference between that and then like, the front,
certainly,
the poster for my thing is him with a chainsaw, and that's his main weapon. Like that's a different thing. Mm-hmm. So like, there's the point where yes, you're going to be very happy if it's super similar. Now you have to change it. You're going to be very upset if your thing just has like that slight tangential thing. And now in your brain, you're like, I got to change it. Like it's because it maybe isn't actually too similar, but now you don't want to feel like you're ripping that thing off.
That's fair. That might not have been my best example. That's
the difference, and that's why I sometimes steer a little bit clear. Also because I don't want to be unintentionally influenced to them when I forget the thing a little bit, like be like, I came up with this idea and it's actually from that. So there's different levels to it. Like if I've engaged with something in the past, I will, and I'm taking inspiration from it, I will re-engage with it to make sure that I'm not like holding things in the back of my head. I'm, a big inspiration around the action hero book that I'm doing is Ben 10. So I've been rewatching all of Ben 10 to make sure that I'm not just doing Ben 10.
I'm calling shenanigans because you were doing that before you wrote that. Before you were deep into this, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but I've deepened it. I've gone deeper.
He was already rewatching all of Ben 10.
Yeah. But I refocused. I was doing very slow after I watched the original. Once I finished the original series, because here's a little Ben 10 fact for you. After the original series, the other 3 shows are just nowhere. They just don't exist. The other 3, like they are so hard to find. They were on CartoonNetwork.com, which was really annoying to use, and I was using that, and then they disappeared from CartoonNetwork.com too. So they are very hard to find.
Anyone knows a definitely totally legal link where Jake can watch Ben 10.
I've since found a place to watch them.
Perfect.
Yeah.
A definitely 100% legal place to watch them.
Listen, I have paid money for most of the seasons of Ben 10 on DVD at some point, so I paid for it.
There you go.
But yeah, no.
Yeah, I think taking inspiration from other things and looking at genre go kind of hand in hand, where you'll see a lot of things that feel original, but you might realize you want to twist a bit.
Yeah, I also think for that reason, it's a lot of fun to take inspiration from things not in your genre, because then you're really not going to be worrying about ripping off the idea, because if you recontextualize it that much, it's just, it's very different. Like if you did a sort of Anakin to Darth Vader fall, but it was in a Western, nobody's going to be sitting there like, man, you just ripped off Star Wars. It's going to be like, that's kind of a cool new context to do that idea.
Like, what a cool character arc.
So that's, I think, taking inspiration from things that are distinct enough from your thing that you're not going to end up just ripping them off is a very good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's going to take us to the end of our Creator Corner, which will also be the end of our episode for today.
So we're not going to have a back issue review next week. It's going to be an exercise poll list. So
yes.
If you're interested in a little bit more content, because you're not going to have that back issue review, you can check out the Strange Saturday Super Show, which will have come out this past Saturday when this comes up. That is going to be an interview with Mr. Dan Price, the artist behind Bigfoot Knows Karate, Masters of the Obvious, and our focal point of the episode, Latex Avenger, which is certainly strange, and it fits that bill perfectly.
It sure does.
But we had a great conversation, a long conversation, about the process of making these books, about just different things in the industry. It's really a great interview that you should check out. But Katie, why don't you talk about... Yeah. Why don't you talk about the polls that we're going to be engaging with next week in lieu of our back issue review?
Yes, like Jay said, extra large. So we have 8 polls coming to you. We've got the long-awaited, I think we mentioned it in literally episode 0 of the podcast. We've got Sinister Sons #1 coming out. Yeah.
There's no way it was that long ago.
I think it was episode 0, my dude.
That's wild.
I could be wrong, but I'm 90% sure.
That's wild.
It is wild, and it's coming. Sinister Sons, #1. We've also got Red Hood the Hill, #1 coming out. We didn't touch on issue 0 this week because it was just a bunch of reprint stories. We've got Transformers #5, The Hunger of the Dusk #6, Petrolhead #4, Our Bones Dust #3, and a couple more new #1s. These ones are indie. We've got The Infernals #1 and The Displaced #1. So we've got a very full poll list rec for you next week. Be sure to tune in for that.
It'll be very fun. Very fun. As the Oversized usually is. Yeah, so that's going to take us to the conclusion here. Hopefully we'll have seen you for the Strange Saturday Super Show, or you'll check back there now. But otherwise, we'll see you all next week, Comic Geeks. I'm going to remind you that we are on recording and that your mother does supposedly listen to this podcast.
Mom, quick, turn it off!